Welcome to the Freelance Writing Podcast, hosted by Melanie Green. In this space, we'll discuss freelance writing and all of the challenges that comes with running this type of business. In this episode, we're going to talk about project management as a freelance writer. So I will tell you that it can be very overwhelming to work with so many different clients who have their own project management systems and to really stay organized with your own tasks. And I'll use an example. So if you're only working with one and they use Asana, then you just use Asana and you can use their to-do list basically as your to-do list. But you have two. Now you're checking Trello and you're checking Asana. And now where do you go to see all of your lists in one place? So I have done a bunch of different things as a freelance writer with this regard. So I have written it down when I first started. I had a daily income goal, and I said, I need to do this many projects a day, this many projects a week, this many projects a month, and I would keep track of how much each project earned, and that got tedious. And then I started to use a OneNote notebook, so kind of like a digital version of that, and I would write down, this blog paid $40 plus $50, and I'd write the name of the blogs in every day. And that became really cumbersome because after a while I was really spending a lot of time managing that system and I wasn't really getting actionable data. I'd have to go back and look at my notes like, how much did you earn last month? I don't know. I don't know. I've been fortunate in that basically all of the work that I do is 1099s. So for tax purposes, I'm able to get a 1099 from each client. The one that doesn't, I use PayPal for, and that's been kind of easy from an income tracking standpoint at the end of the year to make sure, everything is recorded properly. But in terms of daily tasks, this isn't really an effective method, obviously. I then started to use different project management systems to combine the tasks from all of these different clients and all of their different project management systems. Also the clients that would just email me assignments and the clients in Upwork and the clients in Fiverr. And I would use, Asana. I've tried Trello. I've tried Teamwork. And these are great platforms, especially for clients. But in terms of trying to be efficient, I found there was a lot of duplication in terms of the time it took. So now I'm checking their system. I'm filling in all these fields, which can be very time consuming. And then I would go ahead and have to keep track of that. And so it never really worked out. So in, I would say 2016, I created a database. Just at that time, it was a Google Sheet. And so I would just every year restart this database. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I put all revenue generating tasks in there. So a client assigns me something and I have a field for client name or order number. So these are like, a lot of my clients are like marketing agencies, and so their client name would be there, or an order number, some kind of identifying detail, the due date, the date completed. It has like a field for what the actual task is, like 500 words, an RFP response, whatever, about this topic. And then it has, in this case, my name, which I'll explain in a second, and it has cost, compensation, and then like the total. And so basically, this is used essentially for keeping track of projects that I have to pay for things. So like a book review, if I have to buy the book, right? And then there's a notes field, which is very important to keep track of all the little details. And then right now, most of our work is being done through like Google Drive. So I'll put the link to the Google Drive that I'm working on. And so then the other pages in the spreadsheet, I have one that says this is like your daily income every day of the year, listed out. This is your weekly income, and this is your monthly income. I've scaled this when I have had team members. I have scaled it just to myself sometimes, back, down. And so it's a very effective tool because I can look back on like 6 years of data and say, this is kind of what our production has been, what my production has been, if you will. And so I use statuses in there. So it'll be like completed, not started, in progress, to invoiced, canceled. I don't go and track the nitty gritty. Like if a client, a lot of times Maybe I'll get a bonus or they won't pay me. So I don't necessarily go and edit it exactly for that, but I do make sure that all my deadlines are there. I make sure I have a relative idea of how much I'm earning, and so that's what I use that for. Right now, I'm also using project.co in order to use those non-revenue generating tasks. So these are things that aren't for clients. Since client work is a priority, maybe I don't get them done, but they're things long-term that I want to do with the brands that I own and the projects that I'm working on, and the nonfiction projects and the fiction projects and stuff that aren't necessarily revenue generating, but they're still very important to keep track of. I've used Trello for this as well. I've tried to use the spreadsheet for both, so really putting all of those tasks in, but what happens is I end up really losing those client tasks among the other tasks. So that's why I've always kept it separate. I would encourage you to always make sure that your project management system is not redundant and wasting you a lot of time. That's definitely not the kind of system that you want to be working with. The more that you have to spend to organize it, the more it doesn't make sense to be your system, because you're not getting paid to be a project manager, you're getting paid to be a writer. And so you want to make sure you have the most time to write. As I have grown, I have had the opportunity to have an assistant throughout the course of, the 15 years or so that I've been doing this. And at one point, I had an assistant managing the database, is what I call it, but that spreadsheet that keeps track of all of my projects, their deadlines, how much they're generating in terms of income. And I find it's another expense that's taking away from my writing income. It can be helpful the more projects that you have, but you still have to have a pretty solid way of getting your virtual assistant the information that they need. And so that still creates a lot of tasks that you're going to have to deal with. And so I don't think that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. I would say it's a neutral thing, depending on, your strengths. I mean, if you really can't handle it and it's really overwhelming, then maybe that makes sense. But just remember, those things also have a cost. At the end of the day, the goal here is really for you to make the most that you can from freelance writing. Thanks for spending some time with me discussing freelance writing. If you'd like to connect with me further, please feel free to reach me at my website at www.melaniegreen.info.